Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ready, Set, Action. Today you're joining Deborah Horowitz and myself, Christina Whitmer. We're going to discuss networking for business growth. Top 3 tips for small businesses. Hi, Deb.
Hey, how are you?
Great, great. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Another week, right? And we're
Mhm.
getting close to the holidays now. Wow, so much going on.
Yeah,
Lots of activities, right?
yeah.
Networking. So hopefully this will be a timely session
hmm
for everyone so we can make the most of those holiday parties and things that are coming up. But I just wanted to take a moment to welcome everybody into the live stream on networking. And we're in such an interconnected world these days, right? And I think networking is even more important now than ever before for small businesses. There's so many things, so many benefits to be gained by putting yourself out there, whether it's expanding your reach to new clients or just growing your network of people that can make referrals or finding opportunities for growth in everything that is involved with networking. So I really think that hopefully we can generate some great ideas that everybody can take out there, not only in December, but in January and the beginning of the year as well.
hmm
So, why don't you go ahead and get us started with tip number one?
Sure, will do. Yeah, and I was thinking, there was a party I was invited to, like a client colleague party, and I was like, do I want to go to this? But I think when I started to think about the networking slash other reasons to go, it sort of made me want to go a little more. So
Yeah.
I think it's my first tip that is kind of really establishing a goal for your networking. So that way, when you have a goal for networking, it could be new customers, new partners, new employees, building a pipeline that you think you might need 6 months, 12 months down the road. So by setting a goal, it helps you understand the value of every event. And sometimes you go and you need to see it for yourself. And then if you want to go back to an event like that. But, sometimes you can assess, what types of people are going, who's the host, is there a sponsor? All these things can help you figure out, does this meet my goal? It also helps you to figure out how you might interact, things like that. So by setting the goal, um, you know, let's say you want new customers, right? So you might look for events that are about the relationships, about meeting people, about setting those connections for you. I knew that was going to happen. um, we'll see if this goes past. I'll definitely cut this part out. So take a moment to reflect on what you hope. Yeah, I'm going to get her out. I'm sorry.
Okay. Did you get her out of the room?
I did. I should have left the noise on for you. All right. So yes, let me go back to this. So as you look at, if your objective is to find new customers, you might look at the platforms and the events that are building relationships. There are a lot of purposeful networking groups, and it's great because you know that you're all trying to grow each other's business. It feels good because you're supporting each other with business growth. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like some kind of weird speed dating of leads and things like that. It's like, I want to get to know you because I may know people that you can help and vice versa. So because it has such a genuine feel, it's nice to know, that that's the purpose. So, once you've identified your goal, the next part is to really figure out what the strategy is. So let's say the goal is building customers. Well, then you need to figure out what's the target audience. Like define a little bit about the people you are going to meet. You may be walking up and saying, "Hello, I'm so and so." Kind of prepare yourself, right? If it's an owner of a small business, what should you say? if it's someone who you don't, it's somebody who's competitive or something else, think about what you might say to quickly sort of acknowledge that and also be respectful in the process. So you can strategically prepare for those conversations. And what I would say is, let's say you find your target that you want to work with. Not only do you tell them how you do it, and maybe you share, say, hey, I work with businesses like you. I just helped so and so do blank. Would you be up for coffee? No pressure. Just love to see what you're experiencing. So make it, build that sort of playbook in your mind of how you want to talk to them. So you've got that setting goals. Make it clear for yourself before you go, because otherwise you could easily end up with, 10, 20, 30 business cards. And then if you don't know what you're doing or why you're doing it, you're either going to waste a lot of time afterwards doing something right, inputting the cards or following up. But when you know, I want to build my business, these are the type of people, these are the type of decision makers I want to meet, and then the type of companies, you can build your strategy for how you interact with them. Some people even probably put business cards in different pockets, right? Depending on what the intention is. So try to prepare yourself, because otherwise I find networking can burn you out anyway, right? Just doing it. So don't make the after effect even more challenging for yourself. You really need to kind of, get that tight and, the process down. So any thoughts from you for objectives up front for when you network?
I love the fact of being prepared, kind of walking through your mind ahead of time. Okay, if I meet somebody that does something similar to me, how am I going to express that in a professional manner, not spend a lot of time with that person, right?
Mhm.
Because the value may not be there.
Right.
Use of time value. And I also like just, I lost my train of thought. I think it was of the follow-up. So with the follow-up, understanding what you're trying to achieve, what those business goals are, who those clients are, you can clearly communicate that in follow-up too. So you can say that although we were not aligned in terms of potentially doing business together, here's the type of audience that I'm trying to connect with. Share with me the type of audience you're trying to connect with. And, perhaps we can refer, some business to each other down the road, and at least make some value out of those connections that you collect during those networking sessions.
Right. Cool. Well, what about you? Do you have a tip for us to sort of approach?
It kind of goes with your tip from a strategy standpoint. So really identify where you're going to do this networking,
Okay.
right? Because not every event's going to make sense for you.
Mhm.
So, I lean more towards industry events, joining podcasts like ours, right? Where you can be a guest, or even webinars. Webinars are great either to be a presenter or just to be an attendee. There's so much that you can actually learn from just attending events, right? In addition to the contacts that you make along the way. And everything can really kind of feed into that whole networking process. So, for example, I like to plan out what is my marketing calendar going to look like over the course of the year? What industry events do I know that are repeat annual every year on, in such a month, June or whatever it is, right? They always have their annual conferences. So which ones am I going to plan to attend? And then supplement, what webinars are coming up, maybe on a quarterly basis. You can check with certain associations that are relative to the business that you are in to find out what webinars are coming up. And then If you're going to be an attendee at the webinar, I always encourage you to put in the chat session your LinkedIn profile link and say, would love to, connect with others as an attendee, because sometimes it's that peer-to-peer types of connections that really spur that conversation to either do business directly with them or get a referral from them for someone that you can do business with. So never be afraid of putting that information in the chat. I have found that to be extremely beneficial over the course of time. And then, look at those keynote opportunities. One of our friends, Stacy, is doing the keynote circuit, and she's getting lots of traction from that, which creates great brand visibility, credibility, and just a lot of people will come up to you after a keynote or even a webinar presentation and want to give you their card and want to talk with you further about your area of expertise. So those are things that are always good. I think with the industry sessions and with the webinars, staying current on what's happening in your space gives you that competitive advantage for networking and just knowing what to say when you're talking to people. It just adds a different level to what you're saying that all of the other people that are out there are not going to be at that same level in the way that they're presenting themselves. So it really helps you to stand out and be memorable, because when you're at a networking event, you want to be memorable.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I think, look at all of the different benefits that you can get out of those meetups or whatever they are, and make sure that you are taking note to add them, sprinkle them into the calendar throughout the year, and making sure that you're attending enough. And then, of course, for those holiday parties, some of them can be more professional oriented rather than just friends gathering, but you never know who you're going to meet.
True. Yeah.
So to your point, what you started with, don't dismiss that as something that maybe I don't really want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Think it through and think, could there be like-minded people there that I would want to connect with?
Yeah.
And give it a shot.
I liked, like, with the events and the meetups, or I should say, if you're a guest on things, if you're doing speaking events or guest on podcasts or whatever it is, I think that we always talk about repurposing things, right? So one of your goals from that is to have things to use elsewhere, right? Or to connect with people. Like,
absolutely,
if you do a guest speaking or podcast on a certain topic, make it a topic that works for you, that you want to share it with a prospect down the road. Like, so start to think about goals to all of these things that you do. So I definitely like that piece as well.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
And so you're going to close us off with tip number 3.
Yeah, I think so. So tip number 3, no surprise here, but really I think it's how you do this, but social media for networking. How can social media work for you? Because let's face it, it can be a very time-consuming thing. So I'm sure we've talked about this on other episodes. Choose where you're going to be, choose your time and your energy, and based on those goals. But then once you are exploring something, make sure you're using it the best you can be, and then look at social media for networking. And it might depend on which platform you choose. It might depend on what you decide to share. It may depend on the type of content you have to share. It may be when you have video things, these are the things you do. And when you have personal stuff that affects the business, like when I think about even my role, like the business, there's stuff there, but there's me as a president of the business, right? Me as the owner of the business. Like, they overlap, but there's sort of this different thing. And there may be different ways I choose to approach that. So obviously it's a powerful tool for small businesses. It really can level the playing field. For a lot of people, when you think about the big names versus the little names, you can really put yourself out there, put your human face out there, and start to make a dent, especially when you combine in-person network with the social networking network. It's a good combination. So, when we look at the platforms, let's talk a little bit about those. Social networks are nice because think about small business, how they often rely on people they know to grow their business at first, and then sort of this word of mouth, friends of those people. And that's sort of this bubble that starts to grow. Social networks can be very much like that, friends of people you know. So think about it, that you're sort of taking that next step, because once the step after that is, how do you work with people who never would have known you had you not done X to put yourself in front of them? So this is really that middle spot. So, obviously LinkedIn, right? So that's a good one. It's very powerful for professional networking, right? So obviously that's generally when it's B2B service-based businesses. I think that's a big one, to make sure your profile is set up, make sure your links are included. If you have a blog page on your website, add that link as well to your profile. If you have certifications, if you've done speaking events, do you have a PowerPoint that shows your services? Like, really be as complete as possible to making sure that's like a website for you. So LinkedIn, make sure it's got those things, but then also look at how you use it. And I know we've talked about this a little bit too, is when you have a posting schedule, right? So you want to share things, you want to share client stuff, you want to share new ideas, trends, things you're working on, but then start to look at where you want to contribute, right? What conversations do you want to jump into? What things do you want to share with other colleagues directly and publicly sort of tag them? Like, make it a place where you spend X amount of time a week and you have these certain goals. I want to post something. I want to comment on 3 articles or contribute. And I want to share one thing with someone in my network publicly, right? Tag them, because find a connection. So I find that that's a good approach for LinkedIn. I like the LinkedIn newsletters. I like the in-mails for sales. Like, there's all kinds of things. So the more you get comfortable, the more you can start to look at that platform. Time, objectives, and results, right? So look at that so you can assess what those things are. On the other hand, places like Twitter and Blue Sky, it's different, right? It's kind of like this news feed. There's conversations going, but it's really a good one for real-time engagement. And that, again, is going to reward conversations, right? So you can start to follow and post things, but I would almost argue that as you're doing that on Blue Sky or something, you're going to want to comment and be part of conversations, and repost is going to accelerate your following just as fast as quick. And I would argue, don't just focus on followers, just focus on quality and getting in the spaces that make sense so that you can possibly grow your business. Because the truth is, if you could build one or add one client a quarter from social media, that'd be better than any number of followers. So try to focus on what's really meaningful to you for there. And then the last platform I'll talk about, I won't necessarily get into Instagram yet, but I mean, Facebook, it's not really the same type of networking platform, but obviously there are certain things that local businesses, retail, local service-based businesses, there's a lot of potential and, for things there. I even see people using, asking for recommendations, whether it's a plumber or a photographer or whatever it is, right? Yeah. So use that profile, that sharing of yourself, get a little more personal with employees' anniversaries and things like that. Like, you can get a little more fun, but I think that's a good platform for you, to look at for certain goals. So, any other platforms? I mean, are you an Instagram person, or do you?
I was with my last business an Instagram person, but it lent itself better for that, that solution than it does for my, my current recruitment marketing. So I'm primarily LinkedIn,
Mhm.
just because the nature of the audience is
Yeah.
very focused on professionals in talent acquisition. So,
Mhm.
it's different. But I agree that you don't want to focus on the followers. You do want to focus on the quality of the relationships that you're
Mhm.
building, and with that goal in mind of getting one new client a quarter off of social media, or
Mhm.
a month, or whatever your goal is,
Mhm.
really going in that direction, and really looking at how do you create those conversations,
Yeah.
and how do you add value to conversations. So
Mhm.
it's more about showcasing your wisdom and your knowledge, rather than trying to be salesy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And please don't, what we call in the business, pitch slap once you've connected with somebody.
Oh, yeah.
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 Don't go immediately for the jugular after
Right.
you've
Right.
connected, but really do, follow the true essence of networking, which is
Mhm.
building that relationship and
Yeah.
understanding more about that person, before you just assume that they accepted your connection because they want
Mhm.
to buy from you.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've heard in many times just from being in advertising and then marketing, like, it's the dating analysis, like how you date and how you start to talk to people, and the things that you try to identify to see if it's a mutual fit. That is something that takes a few conversations, a few sentences, a few ideas, a few exploring of someone. Where's the trust? So yeah, give time for people to trust you, and be helpful, share information, that kind of stuff, so that they can start to warm up and understand what you have to offer. But I
Hmm.
think the platforms are, the key is really to figure out where you want to be, but because you could push out to platforms with a bit of ease, right, for the
Yeah.
most part. But where do you want to be more present and interact and actually see more value? That's a decision you have to make, where that, based on the objectives. But I do find that, for me, it is a lot of LinkedIn, but, there's also, if you personally love to be on a platform, you can, if it makes sense, look out for opportunities too that
Yeah.
work with your business and your role. So it's that strategic leveraging of those platforms that makes it work. I even with this, when we push it out, it's like, it's showing our thoughts, the things that are on our mind, the things we work with other people about. It's really helpful for snippets to share our expertise, and also a little bit of our personalities, that we genuinely care about helping the small business community to
Yeah.
solve some of these problems that we've seen. So
Yeah, most definitely.
yeah.
So definitely set up the game plan, right? On how you're going to network,
Hmm.
and how you're going to handle all of the different kinds of people that you run into.
Hmm.
Then look at identifying where to network.
Hmm.
And in addition to that face-to-face stuff and those webinars and podcasts, then also incorporate social media, the networking opportunities there, and leverage all of those, different offerings, whether it's the in mails, or, whatever LinkedIn has to offer in addition to
Hmm.
that. Just, really being purposeful in how you set up your plan,
Yeah.
making sure that, when you're going to those events, or making sure you don't miss those important webinars or podcasts, to put them on the calendar,
Hmm.
and have that marketing calendar, kept up to date for you. Was there anything I missed?
No, the one thing you added that I think I'm going to sort of do a better job of is putting these events on my content calendar, the marketing calendar, a
Hmm.
little bit more tightly, because you know because I am working to get better at the messaging and the focus and what we're talking about month to month, so I can really not get too far and stray from the core things that we do. But I think if I can look at, you know, events, speaking events, whatever, I can actually start to fill that in a little bit more comprehensively. Because if I could plan to be on a podcast, you know, look for the opportunity. Honestly, I'm sure I think a lot of them will invite people depending on what kind of expertise you have. So look for those opportunities to sort of fill in the gap and say, you know, my goal next year is to do 4 guest podcast speaking events, right?
Yeah.
And then what do you want from that? And then, you know, I think so based on what you said with that, I think I want to put that into a more purposeful, planned out process, which, you know, it's always a challenge for me.
Always a challenge for me. I'm not necessarily the planner. I'm more the last minute. Oh, that sounds good. Let's go.
Right.
Yeah. So I definitely have to work on that myself.
Well, that will be one of our resolutions then.
Yes. We'll hold each other accountable.
I like it. I like it. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you will join us next time for Ready, Set, Action with Deborah Horowitz and Christina Whitmer. You can follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or various podcast platforms such as Spotify and more. And we hope to see you next week.